Okay, today's movie review is going to be about Shutter Island. It didn't come out that recently, but within a year, so recent enough. I just saw it, however, maybe a couple weeks ago on DVD. So yeah, we're gonna do this from memory. Um, anyway, Shutter Island stars Leonardo DiCaprio. I can't remember his name in it, mainly because I got confused because everybody kept calling him Marshall the entire time because he was like the deputy marshal. And I guess that's how you refer to cops back in the day. It was set in the 1950s. Yeah, 1950s. Around Boston or whatever. So he did have that Boston accent where he'd pronounce two words differently than everything else and then called it good. Anyway, it was him, his partner Chuck. That is the actual name for him. Him and Chuck came over on this ferry to Shutter Island, which is a mental institution, but a really insane mental institution. And one of the patients escaped from there, so they called in the marshals or whatever to come and find this patient. Now it is an island, so it could have gotten far. It's also a very rocky, not a very good island you want to just walk. So, kind of presume he's dead going into it, I guess. Anyway, they get there, they have to surrender their weapons because apparently Shutter Island isn't in the U.S. or they quoted something which I'm assuming for the movie, but marshals had their weapons. They didn't talk to the psychiatric doctor person, and he was kind of helpful, but also not, because he gave background information on the patient. She apparently drowned her 3 children, but thinks that they're still alive. By the way, apparently everyone in Shutter Island, I think, was they killed people, but since they're insane, they just go to Shutter Island, which, sorry, gonna back up a little bit. The movie's kind of like the look and feel of it is creepy. It's not, it's dark is the word I want to use, but it's not like they didn't have light. It's just like that's the eeriness you get, is like dark. The music's a little bit too intense for what's actually going on in the scenes, but it sets it up as very creepy. It's like I'm waiting for Mike Myers to come out and like stab Leonardo DiCaprio. Creepy. The patients there they got some terrifying looking people for the patients. So all in all, you do have this creepy feeling. They did a very good job making that very creepy feeling. So good for them. But anyway, they go to the patient's room. Apparently, she escaped out of a locked room that has, bars on the windows. But no one can figure out how. She didn't take her shoes with her, and she left a note behind that said either for the law of 4 or the rule of 4, which, by the way, if anyone knows what that is, because I never picked up on that, go ahead and tell me, because I'd love to know. And then, who is patient 67, because there's only 66 patients, but this lady believes that there are 67, so that's a big deal to Marshall. So then, being a cop, he wants to interview people, but they don't want him to interview anyone, which, that's mighty suspicious. That's your, I guess, your second clue that something's not right. The first one is, she was able to escape the locked room. But, whatever. So finally, they're able to interview everyone working in a group. It's a group interview session that they can interview everyone. They don't really get any information. No one's taking it seriously, I guess. It's not a big deal that this person is escaped. But, then he's able to interview some of the patients that knew the lady that escaped. I can't remember her name. But while he's interviewing them, he's interviewing some lady, and she asks for a glass of water. Goes and gets her a glass of water. She writes down "run,"
in Marshall's notebook or whatever. And so, uh, well, I'm getting my timeline mixed up. Marshall and Chuck did want to leave the island because of the uncooperativeness of everyone there, but the ferry couldn't get them because it's stormy or something. So then him and Chuck, after they're done interviewing everyone, do kind of run away. But I mean, it's an island. They end up at this place. I don't even know what it is still. House? Like a creepy house. And then Chuck brings the idea like, oh, Marshall, what if they wanted to get you here? What if they don't want you to leave? What if they want to experiment on you? Whatever. Subplot that did develop. Marshall's wife is dead. We learned that she was killed in a fire that was set by like the groundskeeper, whatever I don't know, it was a groundskeeper of whatever apartment they were living in, because he was a pyromaniac. He was sent to the island, so there's kind of that, ooh, maybe Marshall wants to go seek his revenge on him or whatever. And then you learn this because Marshall has flashbacks. He's kind of insane. He is kind of insane, I guess. He did in World War II, and apparently he does have a lot of flashback to dead bodies. And I mean, he was at, I don't think it was a concentration camp. It was like a Nazi murdering camp. Because, you know, you flashback and it's like a train, but a whole bunch of dead bodies outside the train, because I guess they just shot them when they walked off. But it was like the Nazi base or whatever. And you see, like, there's just a bunch of different flashbacks to that. So there's a creepy little girl that always appears. She's like, why didn't you save me? And you always assume it's like the Jewish, like a little Jewish girl. His wife appears to him, and she tells him he needs to get off the island or whatever, otherwise he's going to be stuck there. So basically they decide they want to leave, but instead the power goes out and in a bad storm, and all the patients escape. But they can't go anywhere because it's an island, like I've said multiple times. And so they figured, Marshall and Chuck figured this is the perfect time to go into the super secure prison chamber for patients, like really bad patients. Yeah, so they go there, and this is like the creepiest place ever. If you were to step in this place, I feel like it's the perfect setting for a haunted house if you just want to get freaked out by the atmosphere. Like, it was just very, very creepy. It was a Civil War building or something. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but, so they go in there to find, you know, the pyromaniac and to see if there's a patient 67. So somehow Chuck and Marshall get separated from one another. Oh, Marshall beats up some prisoner real bad, patient real bad. And so, then Chuck goes and takes him back to the patient back to the cell. And Marshall's able to walk around. And he finds, a guy who said earlier that, he told Marshall about this place, kind of. But he had left, but then I guess they found him and brought him back, and his face is all messed up, and Marshall's like, oh, what happened to you? And the guy's like, you did this to me, and Marshall's like, no, I didn't tell anyone where I found you or whatever. And then Chuck finds him. They leave the place, because now all the security guards are looking for Marshall, because he beat up some patient. So Chuck and Marshall just start kind of walking around the terrain. It's very mountainy terrain or whatever. And Chuck's like, hey, I found this thing on patient 67. Maybe you should read it. But Marshall, who's a very paranoid man, has in his head that Chuck is working with on Shutter Island to keep him here. So they kind of split up. Long story, something's happening in the lighthouse. Brain procedures or whatever are happening in the lighthouse. And Marshall wants to go and find out what that is. Somehow Chuck falls off a rock, or at least that's what Marshall's supposed to believe. And when he climbs down this rock, very amazing, he climbs down the rock, finds the patient that they were looking for, who's not actually a patient but used to work there, but then didn't want to do brain procedures on people anymore. So she was told she was mental, so they had to keep her there. And basically hints that they're going to do the same thing to Marshall since he knows too much. Marshall goes back to the building or whatever, finds the doctor. And he's like, hey, where's my partner Chuck? And doctor's like, you didn't have a partner when you came in here. And we're like, oh no. But then Marshall actually does play along with it. Finally decides to end up going, after he beats up a doctor, by the way, a different doctor. He ends up going to the lighthouse, going in there because he's going to see, you know, hey, they're doing brain things on all these people. But turns out they're not. Turns out Marshall's actually patient there. Marshall's wife had drowned their 3 children, and Marshall is just repressing all that and has really gone insane and making up all these scenarios because he wants to seem like a good guy. He did shoot his wife because she drowned his 3 kids, but he won't admit to it. So they put on this elaborate thing. Apparently, Chuck is actually Marshall's doctor that watches over him. So they had all that. Ends up in the end, they're like, Marshall, you have to, you know, admit that you did this. We're going to have to do a frontal lobe thingamabob, take out part of his brain. Remember any of it? And so Marshall did up to it, and then the next came out, and he's back in the same scenario.
So they allude to, you know, walking him away. And then he says something like, wouldn't you rather die a hero than as like coward or something? So you're like, oh, maybe he does get it. Or at least that's what I felt when I saw it. And then it ends. But my main question is, how did he get on the ferry first? Did they really let him off the island and then just bring him back on the ferry? Because that seems kind of dangerous. But, whatever. That's Shutter Island. It was really well done. Very long, though. I had to stop and watch it within 2 days. Mainly because I was tired. But I would recommend it. It's well worth watching. Sorry I spoiled the ending for you. I actually didn't guess what was going to happen. So that threw me for a loop. But, also just trying to figure out what was going on was insane as well. Because, you know, it's the flashback. It's just trying to figure out and just remembers names. But, yeah. Go ahead, watch that, see what you think, and I'll be back next time with something new.